Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be carrying on with the work on the oval beetle pickup. So in the last video we managed to get a lot of the filler and paint off the body panels. And doing so, I've managed to uncover lots of areas that need repair. And I also had a chance to remove the old paint and filler on these rear wings as well. So in the last video, I asked you guys where the whole back end is originally from. I'm thinking it's an old American truck of some description, and it has these kind of wings fenders on the back. And you guys have kindly come up with lots of suggestions of what this rear end could actually be, but I haven't found anything concrete yet, anything that looks identical to what I've got. So if you do know anything about old American trucks or trucks in general, and you know what this back end came off, please let me know in the comments. And what I've been doing is asking you guys for a really cool name for this project, and there's been absolutely tons. We're going to put the names in a hat, dig one out and see what comes up. But it's not too late. If you do come up with a good name for this car, please leave it in the comments below. So if you're new to this channel, welcome on board. This is a workshop in Japan. I am speaking English, and hopefully we'll be able to restore some very unique, rare cars together. And previously, when I was in the UK and I worked restoring old cars, I was kind of spoiled with the correct tooling and the correct workshop environment. I had ramps and specialist tools. But in this situation where I'm at now currently, I don't have many specialist tools. So if you do fancy rebuilding cars in your shed at home, or you're a keen DIY mechanic, this channel is definitely for you. So when dealing with projects on this scale, it sometimes can be a bit scary, a bit daunting on where to actually start. But my answer is simple. You just got to start somewhere. And for me, I'm going to start with the driver's door. In the previous video, I explained that the door gap here was extremely tight. It was actually touching this pillar here. But the door gap at the back here was absolutely fine. I was pretty happy with that. So the first thing I needed to do was remove the door. Pretty simple stuff, just undo the screws that hold the door in. But unfortunately, this car hasn't had the doors removed for an extremely long time, and these screws were tight and rusted in position. And in fact, the screws at the bottom here were pretty much missing their faces on the front. So normally in this situation, my go-to tool would be an impact driver. It has a screwdriver head on the end of it, and you put it in position and smack it with a big club hammer, and what it does, it kind of loosens the bolts off, cracks them off so you can undo them. But in typical fashion of this channel, I don't actually have an impact driver yet, so what I was able to do is just heat up the screws nice and hot, crack them off with a large screwdriver and a spanner. And the screws at the bottom, the awkward ones, I just drilled them off and then drilled the heads off. And then what I've done is, where I've got this rotten section of panel here, I was able just to extract the captive nut plate from the back. And here it is. This is the captive nut plate that sits behind this panel, and the screws go through here. I just drilled them out and tapped them so I can reuse this. Interestingly enough though, this vehicle here is fitted with 4 screw holes. This was later changed to 3 screw holes on later Beetles. So although it sounds simple, it's just a case of moving the door back, that isn't actually the case for this particular car. Moving the door back this way will obviously decrease the gap behind the door, which would mean the door wouldn't shut. And on this particular vehicle, that's not actually a bad thing. If the doors move back further here, I can make an incision in the panel and bring the panel back as well to make the gap down the side here more uniform. And just looking at the metal here, somebody has tried beating it and rolling it round to increase the door gap, but I don't think that was very successful, so they moved the door forward. So if you do come across a beetle with a failed check strap, what you'll find is the hinge bends the panel just here like that. But I think this was done on purpose. I think what they did is remove the check strap, open the door and bent the hinges forward to decrease this gap here and increase the gap at the back. So to get my gap back that I need on this edge here and on the front of this panel, what I'm going to do is something extremely crude. It's not for everyone. I'll be heating up these hinges and I'll be knocking them forwards to increase the gap down the side here, and then at the back of the door here where the gap's going to close up, I'll then make an incision on the panel and I'll move the panel back to where I need it to get this gap good. So there we go, I've now successfully got a gap back behind these hinges, just using a blowtorch to heat up the hinge and then giving it a clout with a piece of wood and a club hammer. So of course you don't actually have to heat up the hinges, but doing so it will make the metal soft and easier to move. So if you do decide to use a blowtorch to help you manipulate panels, heat things up, etc., it's worth knowing that the hottest point is actually here and not at the end of the flame. It's where it just starts to change colour at this point here. That's the hottest part. So what I've done is just bolted the door back on, and I can actually see the door gaps just down here, and on this front edge here I didn't actually have a gap at all, and now I've got a gap, so I'm really chuffed with that. And at the back here, because I've moved the door backwards, this gap here has closed up, which is a good thing because this edge here isn't particularly straight anyway, so I can make an incision, bend this to wherever I need it before I do the repair down here. So as I said before, on the passenger side, I'm actually pretty happy with the gap. It's not so bad. The biggest problem on this area here is this rot. So this area on the rear quarter panel is pretty bad. It's not only that though, the area behind the panel where they've welded it into position, it looks really messy, but also they have smashed this area in here, probably to bring this panel back out, but even so, the door gap at the bottom is pretty much non-existent, and it's a little bit wavy up here. And yeah, to be honest, what I'll probably do is do these in a couple of bites. I'll probably put a repair panel going down here so I can straighten this edge out, and we'll just cut this section out here and remake this panel. So what I've done, even though this panel's a complete mess, I've just taken some measurements so I know where the original position is. And then what I've done is I've just measured from the bottom edge here and further up, just so I can get a straight line here, which will be my cut line, and I'll be cutting down here just in front where that fender bolts in. So that's this rear quarter panel cut out, and now we can really see what is going on behind here. So what you're looking at here, this rotten section, is the top part of the heater channel, and the heater channel is a box section that runs right the way from the bulkhead panel all the way down the car, and inside here there is a tube to transport hot air from the engine to the heaters. But not only that, this is a box section and it's there to create strength. And without the strength in this box section, you can end up with quite a floppy, sagging car. So this is actually quite an important area that really needs to be addressed. So normally in this situation, I'd recommend just putting in a whole new heater channel, or even better, take the body off and then put a new heater channel in. And when it comes to putting in new heater channels on Beetles, you don't actually have to take the body off at all. You can do this panel in situ, and you can cut out sections like this just to put the new channel in, bolt it down, weld it all into position, then repair the rear quarter panels. And this project's a bit different in the way that the customer doesn't want to put new heater channels in this, and he doesn't want a body off restoration. He just wants the rusted areas repaired. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut out this rotten section and make a new section for the top of the heater channel. Not only that, I seem to be missing a lot of the heater channel underneath here. But the inside of the heater channel, where it rolls over, and this section here does look pretty solid. And something else that's worth mentioning at this point, if you do decide to do heater channel work on your Beetle, first up, measure the door gaps. Second, put a strengthening bar, weld a bar from the pillars across here, weld it in position, so if you take the strength out of this heater channel, the thing won't fold in half. But for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to repair it in sections. So structurally it's pretty bad anyway, and it is very soft, so any kind of strength or shape's already been lost. So what I'm going to do is cut out this rusted section, refab this out of steel, and then I can get on with doing the other repairs like the quarter panel. So with this extremely rotten area here, what I've done is I've just templated it using a piece of paper and just a pen. And then once I've templated it onto a sheet of steel, I can then go ahead, bend it and form it to make a repair panel like this one here. And this repair panel will go in place of the rotten steel that's underneath here. I do tend to do a lot of my panel making before I've chopped the areas out, as I feel that I can get an idea of the shape. And to form this panel, what I've done along where the lines are, I've just used some metal bending pliers like these here. I mean, these can be picked up relatively cheap, and yeah, they save a lot of stress. Just whack it in there, just bend it to how you want it. And when it comes to adding flanged edges or hole punching, I've been previously using a manual version like this, but recently I did invest in an air one. And these air ones can be picked up pretty cheap. It's the same thing. You have what I call a panel joggler, so you can put a step in a panel, but it also has a hole punch on the other side. So what I found using these in the UK, they don't last a long time, even though I was oiling it and looking after it. These don't really last as long as I want to. So just bear that in mind if you're buying something like this. They are relatively cheap and replaceable, but they just don't last very long. So if you do decide to make a repair panel like this one here, I probably would suggest maybe buying a a heater channel or using cuts off a heater channel just to make this repair job a bit easier. But in the same breath, I probably wouldn't recommend just trying to repair a section of heater channel. I'm a big fan of just replacing the whole lot in one go, but this is the way this project's going to be, so this is what I've got to do. I would absolutely love to rip this little truck down to its bare bones and replace the panels in large sections. But if I did replace all the rusty panels on this truck, well, I'd have to start with nothing. So what I need to do now is just cut out the rotten section and make a lower section of that panel just so I can get some strength back into it. But when talking about strength, this has lost all its strength in this corner. But if you're doing this kind of job, please make sure you brace this area across here. I've said it twice. But what happens is if you don't and you weld all these panels in, you can actually change the hole where the door sits and your door might not sit as well as it should. So I was just about to weld our panel into place, but then I thought, do you know what, I'll just knock up this panel down here. I just cut it out. It was hanging off anyway. It looked like that on the outside, but on the inside, yeah, well, it's totally rotten. So basically that is just a sheet of steel, and I've just put 2 right-angled edges and drilled some holes on it. And on the underside here, I've just replaced this section with some flat steel. Normally this panel does have pressings in there, but I'm not too worried about it. It is pretty custom, but it's a vast improvement on what actually came off. So all I've done at this point is just tacked this panel into position, nothing more. Gave me a chance just to check my measurements. So at this point, I was really hoping to have myself a gas MIG welder to do the next restoration, which would be the pickup. Previously, what I was using is this little fella here. It is a gasless MIG welder. It's ridiculously cheap, but it has managed to restore both the mirror and the beetle. And I've still not got a MIG welder, so we're going to break out our ridiculously cheap welder, and we're going to do all the welding on this truck with this little fella. Well, unless something happens and I manage to get hold of a gas MIG welder. And if you have watched the previous build videos, you do know that I do love a bit of zinc. So the inside of these panels have just had a really light coat of zinc. It's this stuff here, and it's also a weld through. So what I need to do now is plug weld up all these holes. Loads more here as well, and down the side here, tidy it up a bit, spray it with some zinc, and we're pretty much done. You can see here that I've left quite a generous amount on where these panels sit. What I normally do is get the panels in first, and then I can trim off the excess afterwards. Something I forgot to mention about gasless MIG welders is the amount of splatter. There's no shielding with what you'd have a gas on a MIG welder, so you do end up with quite a bit of a mess. And you can see here, it's just covered in splatter. But underneath all that are some pretty good plug welds. So there you go, that's that really rotten area of the rear part of the heater channel sorted. And also, the door still shuts, so I know that I haven't lost too much structural integrity on this area. And although doing a repair like this, a lot of the panels are available. You could buy a heater channel and just replace the whole lot, or you could buy a heater channel and just use sections of it. And you can also buy panels like this one here, all pre-made, ready with the holes for the running boards. But if you do decide to do it this way, just using sheet metal, it's relatively cheap. Panels in Japan seem to be very, very expensive at the moment. So doing something like this, it was done relatively cheap, so that'll keep the customer happy too. And what I'm left with is a big gaping hole. So I'm gonna have to manufacture some kind of repair panel for this area to replace that completely rotten section that was there before. So here's the plan. I do know that this area here is rusty, but not only that, it is very deformed and really banged around. This is where they've kind of pulled the panels across and just welded straight down here. The gap was probably not right, so they've just beat it in and added filler. So what I need to do is make a repair section for this bit here, and what I'll do is repair this section as a separate strip at a later date. And in situations like this where you have lots of panels, lots of bends, maybe some complicated shapes, I do find it easier just to make a single panel at a time, and then I can make the separate panels to join the panel that I've just made. So what I've just done is marked my sheet of steel, cut it out, and then just bent the edges over. And when making this panel, I didn't really put much thought into it. It was just the case of marking it out, cutting it, and bending it. I have put some hole punches just along that bottom edge, so where it goes on the heater channel, I can then plug weld those back in. One thing that I will say though, I did measure a line up here. I knew that it's 30 centimeters from this point to the bottom of the panel, both at the front and the back. But not only that, the panel itself is tapered. So at the back of the panel, this edge here is about 10 mil, and on the front edge, it's about 20 mil. So I had to incorporate that kind of triangular shape in the bottom. But other than that, it's quite a basic panel. And the panel will sit somewhere like this here. Obviously, I haven't cut out the rear section here, but also I need to lose some material on this front edge so I can get the panel to sit nicely. So I'll do that first. And what I've done is I've purposely made this panel too long, and this allows me a little bit more wiggle room on where I want to stitch this panel back in. So what I've just done is offered the new panel into position, and this top line here is where the panel sits. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a flanged edge on this panel. So I have marked it approximately 10 millimeters below the line of where the panel sat. But not only that, I do need to cut this edge right up to the top line here. Cut it across here, remove this section. So when you're welding two bits of steel together, I mean, there's nothing wrong really with just buttoning together and putting a weld down the middle there. But what I prefer to do where possible is to put a stepped flange in the panel, and then I can rest the other panel over the top, leaving some meat behind the panel, and then just welding in between the gap. And previously my flange tool is a manual one, and to be honest, there's nothing wrong with using a manual one like this. It will hurt your hands after a while. To make my life a little bit easier, I did get an air one. So just along here is where I've put that flange. It's like a step now. So what I can do, if I was to weld these two panels together, I can weld down the center here and the panel itself will stay quite flush. But not only that, putting a joggle or a flange in a panel does create more strength, and also when you're welding, you're not welding with a gap behind the panel, you're actually welding through the panel to the joggled edge. What I've just done is offered the panel up into position. It gave me a chance to mark the inside of the panel just along this arc shape here. I'm just going to remove some of the material here. It just makes things a little bit easier. So what I've just done is tack this panel into position. I like to make sure that I'm happy with the fitment at this point. I'm not too worried about the door gap because I'm going to leave this panel here as an open edge until I do the work on the door. But overall, it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and start welding this in. So that's the new repair panel welded into place. What I've done is just plug welded the bottoms there. And then what I did is I was stitching this panel in probably about an inch apart to start with, and then going back, welding in between, and in between that, leaving probably a gap at the end, probably about 5 mil between the welds. And something to consider when you're welding is the amount of heat generated. If I, for example, was to put a seam weld right the way down this panel, the chances are the heat would distort the panel. And obviously in this situation, heat distortion is the least of my worries. I mean, this thing is beat, but if I can get some panels in there and they're relatively straight, that does actually mean less filler work. So what I need to do next at this point is the panel that goes behind here. That's the inside of the wheel arch. It is looking extremely moody. It's covered with gaps and welds and some major chod and rust in there. So what I need to do is clean this area up first, see what we're left with, and then start making a new section probably around here. So after cleaning this area up here, although it does have a rather ropey looking panel put in there, it is relatively strong, so I'm quite happy with that. The problem is down here, you can see it's corroded, it's very rotty, so this area here needs to be cut out. What I'll do is I'll template it, then I'll cut it out, we'll make it out of fresh steel and we'll weld a repair panel. What I've also done is I've just cut the line following the panel behind there where I know it's on the flat edge, and I've just tacked it in position here. I'm pretty happy with this area here, so that's okay. It's just this bit at the bottom. So there we go, that's the old panel there, and that's the new panel that we'll be putting into its position. And what I've done is there's a return edge on this closing panel there. This surface here was a bit rusty, so I've just belt sanded it back and put some rust treatment on there. What I'm going to do though is weld this panel back into position. What I'll do is I'm going to be tacking it and cutting it, then tacking it into position, and that way I can kind of manipulate it as I go. And there you go, that's that panel welded into position, and I've just ground the welds down. So this whole area and all the repairs behind didn't really take that much time at all. If it was something like the 67 Beetle that I've been doing, these things take a little bit longer. In fact, I'd still be making the panel for it. But what I've been doing on this job is trying to work as fast as I can. I haven't even used any panels, it's just sheet steel. And what this does, it keeps the cost down. The thing is with this truck project, it is going to be done on a budget. So doing repairs like this, I consider them good. They're not excellent, but they're good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It does put some strength back into the car, and we have removed the rot. It just could look a little bit prettier, but hey, that's what bodyworking's for. And also this kind of repair, whether it be the inside of the heater channel or this repair section around the corner, can be done at home, and it can be done at a relatively cheap price. I haven't bought any expensive panels. All I've used is sheet metal. I haven't even used any expensive tools. I don't have a sheet metal bender, and I don't have an English wheel or any of those fancy expensive tools. So this can be done at home. So that's quite a big chunk done, quite an important chunk done on this project. Obviously I still need to make the strip up here. I do need to do something with this, and there's plenty more to come. But I'm going to leave it there for today. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in and watching another episode on this pickup truck. And we're probably going to pick up where we left off in the next episode. And I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Cheers! So if you like this kind of thing and you're new to the channel, please make sure you subscribe. Also hit that like button and leave a comment.